Got another Blind Reacts going to be with Patsy and John together. They're with Barbara Walters on 2020 and 2000 interview. So let's go.
From Times Square in New York, Barbara Walters.
Good evening and welcome to 2020 Friday. Tonight, a special hour. The mystery, the tragedy, the case of John and Patsy Ramsey. As you know, 3 years ago Christmas, their daughter, JonBenét, was brutally murdered. From the beginning, suspicion fell on her parents. It shadows them to this day. Could John and Patsy Ramsey have killed their own child in such a horrific way? Why did the police suspect them? And if they didn't commit the crime, who did? Tonight, for the first time, the Ramseys tell me the story of their nightmare, hoping, they say, that their appearance might draw out information about JonBenét's murder. For the same reason, they have written a book titled The Death of Innocence, which is published today. We will also show you, for the first time on television, actual police photos of the crime scene. Be assured they will not be overly graphic or distasteful. So, now the Ramsey story. The questions answered with no lawyers present, no holds barred. Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, did either of you have anything to do with the death of your daughter?
No.
No. Mr.
Right out the gate, Barbara be asking the questions right out the gate and look at people dead in their face.
Ramsey, did you kill JonBenét?
No, I did not.
Mrs. Ramsey, did you kill your daughter?
No, I did not kill my daughter.
How do you feel when I ask you these questions?
Insulted, pain, hurtful. How can I tell you how much I love my daughter?
And that's what I was going to say even before she said that. I was like, her face says it all. Her face is like, how dare you?
I love her from the depths of my being.
But it's like, and even the way that she's talking, the tone of her voice, it's like, how dare you? It's like, how dare you? Because I got to say, how dare you? But it's like, how dare you? Do you believe me?
It's just unimaginable.
Unimaginable, too, that the life of this 6-year-old could be snuffed out so suddenly.
And not to insinuate that she's done anything, but to sort of insinuate that there's something back there. Because sometimes, even if you ask somebody something and they know something, their brain will immediately think about it. And so while they're trying to respond in the moment, their brain is thinking about the situation, but they're trying to put on the poker face.
And so viciously. JonBenét Ramsey was a child filled with promise.
She was a ball of fire. She could stand on her head. She could hula hoop. She was an entertainer from the word go.
She was a spark plug in our family. That's how I looked at her. She kept things alive and going.
John and Patsy Ramsey had moved to Boulder 5 years earlier from Atlanta with JonBenét and her older brother Burke. The scars of 2 recent family crises seemed to be healing: Patsy's near-fatal bout with ovarian cancer and the death of Beth Ramsey in an auto accident. She was the oldest of John Ramsey's 3 children from a previous marriage. John's software business was thriving, and to all appearances, so was the family. Until that tragic Christmas Day in 1996. John and Patsy Ramsey returned home with JonBenét and her 9-year-old brother Burke after spending the evening with friends. They got death of Beth Ramsey in an auto accident. She was the oldest of John Ramsey's 3.
You remember we talked about in a previous video, John specifically mentioned, he said, after, he said, what they asked, they asked, in 60 Minutes Australia, asked, like, what did you do after, the death of JonBenét? And so we just focused on our youngest son. And we're talking about Andrew right here, talking about Beth, and I can't remember the other one's name. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. But these are his kids from the previous marriage.
3 children from a previous marriage. John's software business was thriving, and to all appearances, so was the family.
So you got Andrew in there. Okay. Cool.
Until that tragic Christmas Day in 1996. John and Patsy Ramsey returned home with JonBenét and her 9-year-old brother Burke after spending the evening with friends. They got back about 9 o'clock. Everything seemed normal.
We came home, went to bed. JonBenét was asleep when we arrived home. We took her to bed and got Burke to bed and went to sleep.
You took a melatonin pill, so you slept soundly?
Unfortunately, I did.
There was a family vacation planned the next day. Patsy Ramsey says she got up early to get ready, threw on the clothes she'd worn the night before, and started downstairs from her 3rd-floor bedroom at about 5:30 a.m.
And as I came to the bottom of the stairs, there were 3 pages neatly laid across one of the runs of the stairway. I turned around to start to see what it was, and Realized after I read the first couple of lines.
It was a ransom note
Yes, it was.
that said,
The robbers were not in the rush, apparently, according to this story. The robbers were not in a rush. They laid the note down neatly, and you walk past it in the morning time. Somebody asked me on another video, do I think that JonBenét was still in her bed or she got up? I don't think JonBenét ever made it to her bed, personally, because being in my bed would require me sound asleep and away from any trouble. There would be no need for trouble. There would only be a need for trouble if I was interacting with somebody. So I don't think JonBenét was in her bed at all.
I believe it said, listen carefully, something like, we have your daughter. And I just dashed back up the stairs as fast as I could and pushed her door open, and she wasn't in her bed.
and then?
And then I just screamed for John, screamed.
I knew from Patsy's tone of voice that something was very wrong, and I rushed downstairs, and she told me there was a note, and I read it.
It was just so
briefly.
unbelievable. You just
Why did she cut him off?
you
It's
can't.
hard to grasp.
The note said, "We have your daughter in our possession." It demanded $118,000 in ransom, threatened that JonBenét would be beheaded, and warned the Ramseys that they were being watched. The note said, if you do anything, if police come, if FBI come, your daughter will die. You called 911.
Yes, I did. It would have been impossible to sit there and wait by ourselves.
You also called friends to come over. Was that wise?
Your daughter is gone.
Desperate.
She's in the hands of a madman. And you reach out for any help you can get. If I have a regret, it's I didn't get more help that morning.
The police searched your house, but they didn't find JonBenét. But at one point, you went downstairs and found an open window.
Yes.
A window that you had broken yourself at one point to put your hand through and find the latch.
Right.
That window was in a storage room at the rear of the house. It was on the other end of the basement from the room in which JonBenét's body would later be found. What did you think when you saw this open window?
I was a bit alarmed, but I was more alarmed with the Samsonite suitcase that was standing up below the window.
I have seen the actual police photograph that was taken of that window and the suitcase, and there it was in full sight.
That looked wrong. That suitcase did not belong there.
It was out of place.
It's out of place.
So you thought perhaps the kidnapper had gone through that window?
That was my first impression, yes.
7 hours after the police first arrived, it was now around 1 p.m., the police asked you and a friend to search the whole house again. At that point, you opened the door to the small room. Tell me about it.
I knew instantly what I'd found. I'd found my daughter. And
What did you see?
I saw her lying on the floor with a white blanket. She was lying on a white blanket. Her hands were tied above her head. She had tape over her mouth. Her eyes were closed. I immediately knelt down over her, felt her cheek, took the tape off immediately off her mouth. I tried to untie the cord that was around her arms. I couldn't get the knot untied.
Did you scream?
I screamed. I picked her up, and I ran upstairs. And it was like a dream when you scream, but you can't say anything. All you can do is scream. That's what I did.
Yes.
I took her upstairs and laid her on the floor, and still had a hope that she was alive.
I remember walking in and seeing her lying there.
I'm confused because that didn't make sense. You searched it, didn't find anything. Cops searched it, didn't find anything. And on the last time you searched, then that's when you found everything. Barbara seems like she prompted you to say that you screamed. I am confused because neither one of them are emotional in terms of what this is. They're holding their composure very well. There's no breaking down and, please bring my daughter back and all such as that, but they're both holding their composure really well. That's confusing to me.
In front of the Christmas tree. And I looked at John and he said, And nothing felt real. I felt like it was, my life was in slow motion.
And Patsy's leaning back in her chair as if she's shying away from talking about it or saying certain things.
This was not really happening. I knelt down over her and just laid my body on her body and my cheek against her cheek, and it was cold. And I just kept saying, no, ask God to raise her.
JonBenét's body was stiff. She had apparently been...
So I think that was a real line that was actually said maybe prior to coming upstairs, maybe when they first discovered her, maybe the night before, but didn't want to say nothing.
For hours. An intricate noose apparatus called a garrote was tightly pulled around her neck, cutting into the flesh. She had been strangled to death. An autopsy would later reveal that JonBenét had also suffered a skull fracture, the result of a blow to the head, and had been sexually... What had begun as a kidnapping case for the police was now a brutal homicide.
Because this is what's weird, and this is what I'm saying don't match. Why would kidnappers come take the girl and immediately unalive her? That doesn't make sense. Why would they ask for a specific amount that they should not know, $118,000? Why not $1 million? They apparently know who you are. Why 118? Then that would lead us to somebody in your company or somebody very close that knows your records, right? That would ask specifically for your bonus. So that's weird that they would say 118. So either it has to be somebody that knows you, and that's why a lot of people talk about, Patsy had to write the letter. And I think in her rush, she threw 118 down there to kind of stage the entire thing, walked downstairs, walked past the letter, turned around, saw the letter, ran upstairs, gave it to John. John saw the letter, and we both just screamed. Everybody screaming. What is Burke doing? And I think in another interview, Burke said he was just in the room, didn't know what was going on, sitting in there with the lights off, so on and so forth.
The police stayed with you all that day and the following day. You felt that you were under their protection because you didn't know where this could have been. But it turns out that they were really scrutinizing the two of you, that you were already suspects. Did you have any idea then that you were suspects?
No, not at all.
It was reported also, Mr. Ramsey, that shortly after you found your daughter's body, that you called the pilot of your plane to arrange a flight to Atlanta. Is that true?
I did. We had been asked to leave the house. Within minutes of that happening, the police took the house over. We had nowhere to go. Atlanta was our home. We lived in Atlanta for 25 years. That's where our family was. We wanted to go home.
During the day that your child was found, and in the days following, Mr. Ramsey, there were reports from the police that you didn't seem distraught. You weren't sobbing. You seemed stoic. It was said you two rarely talked to each other. To them, this made it look as if you were guilty.
I've heard that, and I find that unbelievable. I've lost 2 children, and for someone to tell me that I didn't act right, I don't accept.
There is the impression that from day one, the two of you refused to cooperate with the police.
No, that is a media myth. We met with the police on the 26th. We met talked with them for hours on the 27th. When they asked us to come to the police station, we said, yeah, we want to keep working with you, but can't you come here? We can't go out. Patsy was in bed. Patsy was barely able to move, and all we asked was they come here. They said, well, no, we have paperwork at the police station we might need to get hold of.
Okay,
I believe John in terms of that, he's speaking freely. He's not speaking as one who's guilty. What he is doing, obviously, is I believe that there's a cover up, and I believe that, but he's not speaking of anybody. If you were to press him and ask him, he's free of guilt. He doesn't speak of anybody that's trying to hide anything for himself. He's open. I mean, he's kind of light in that way. But his eyes have something behind them.
27th, a very good friend of yours, Mike Bynum, said to you, I think that you should hire lawyers.
Mm-hmm. Mike knew things that were going on that we didn't know. He knew that the police by that time were withholding JonBenét's body for burial. He also, based on his experience as a
Patsy looking down.
prosecutor and as a district attorney, could see that the police were very quickly focusing on us as the killer.
Your lawyers advised you then not to submit to police questions. Why not, people say? Wouldn't you have wanted to tell them everything?
Well, I don't recall that our lawyers told
I'm waiting for Patsy to say something. She's not saying nothing.
us that at the time.
And as I suspect, Cool John is smoothing it over and cleaning it all up, and Patsy's looking down, clean it up, John. Just clean it up, do something. But I think with that look down, if we can go back to that, I think with that look down, it shows that she's still dealing with the pain of the loss in her own way. But she's trying to hold it together because we have to hold up this front. We have to hold up this facade of getting the story out and getting the story together. We got to write a book explaining our side. We got to do this whole media press thing. John is good at that stuff, man. But he's CEO, and man, he's doing what executives do. And Patsy's not saying anything because she's super emotional. If you get her too excited, she'll go off the deep end. To just start talking.
We were perfectly willing and anxious to work with the police to find the killer. We had a higher priority at that point, and that was to bury our daughter.
But it would, in fact, be 4 months before the Ramseys would sit down with detectives for formal interrogation. There was a mutual distrust between the Boulder Police Department and the Ramsey family. Why didn't you take a lie detector test?
No one
That's
ever
another-
asked us
Really?
to take the lie detector test.
Police never asked you to take a lie detector test?
No.
I was asked during my interview with Steve Thomas hypothetical questions. One of the policemen that investigated this murder. He said, if I were to ask you to take a lie detector test, what would you say? I said, I would be offended. That's what I would say. I wasn't interested in proving my innocence at that point. That
We were
was
frightened.
a non-issue.
There's them loose.
Mr. Ramsey, would you now take a lie detector
I
test?
would, certainly.
Would you, Mrs. Ramsey?
Yes, I would take a lie detector test.
A hypothetical question
First of all, you guys don't want to take a lie detector test. They don't want to.
that investigated this murder. He said, if I were to ask you to take a lie detector test, what would you say? I said, I would be offended. That's what I would say. I wasn't interested in proving my innocence at that point.
But this is the thing that's weird about that statement. Why wouldn't you be? Because most families, most people who are innocent, run to the lie detector test. They run to give a DNA sample. They run to do everything. Why would you not be running to prove your innocence, to say, okay, well, we want to go ahead and get me out of the way so that I understand, I've seen enough to know that, I got to be considered, but lie detector, DNA sample, everything that you need to do to rule us out to move forward. But then you get mad at the cops when they're like, yo, we can't move forward unless we rule you out definitively. And then, but like I say, smooth John is doing his thing. John is got nothing to hide. I mean, I guess I would, but then Patsy's like, maybe I think I would. She doesn't want to, because it's like, and I have to pull back. I have to stutter a little bit, and I have to say it like I gotta talk out of one side of my mouth, because what if people come ask me to take a lie detector test, right? And I think they actually did. I'll look it up. I think they actually did take a lie detector test and they passed. But we know from experience that lie detector tests can be tricked. They can be passed. And sometimes lie detector tests give false positives, so that's the nature. That's why they're not admissible alone in court, because they can't stand on their own, because they're not significantly or particularly reliable enough. They're just one step of many things.
We were frightened.
A non-issue.
There's them loose.
Mr. Ramsey, would you now take a lie detector
I
test?
would, certainly.
Would you, Mrs. Ramsey?
Yes, I would take a lie detector test.
When you realized that you two were the prime suspects, what did you think? What did you feel? What did you say?
Well, we were outraged. We were shocked. How could they think that?
Mr. Ramsey, the police officer that day, Linda Arndt, said on this very program that when you put your daughter's body down, you looked straight into her eyes.
His face was just inches from mine.
And Linda Arndt said she felt then from your expression that the kid was in the house and she was afraid of you.
Well, the question I would ask Linda Arndt, has she ever looked before in the eyes of a father who has just been told his 6-year-old daughter is dead? lying there on the floor in front of him. I don't know what I looked like. I'm sure I was in agony. I'm sure I went into shock. Linda Arndt's ability to look in someone's eyes and determine they were killed is a remarkable talent.
You just can't believe it. I mean, we're suffering from having lost our child. And then for someone to accuse you, it's just, you can't believe that would happen.
Why did they accuse you?
I think the police looked at the situation, didn't apply a lot of logic to it, and said, child in the home, the book says the parents always did it. And that became the conclusion. The tragedy of the police investigation was that it ended on December 26th.
The big questions. Why did police suspect the Ramseys? Did Patsy Ramsey snap that night and strike out at her daughter? Or did John Ramsey abuse his little girl, as some think? When we come back, the possible motives for murder. Did either of you for a moment suspect?
I don't, I don't know about all the assaults from John's perspective, so I don't get into all that and stuff like that. And I don't know, but I do know, I do know from what I'm seeing here that Patsy did take a lie detector test. I think they both did. They took 2 sets of lie detector tests. First set was inconclusive, but the second one was administered by new people. Second tests found that both Patsy and John were truthful when they denied involvement. When they denied involvement with JonBenét's death. Several conditions for the tests: that they had to be in Atlanta by an independent examiner, that the results be made public. Views by the FBI had different views on the test. Police said FBI was not independent because it was involved in the investigation, while the Ramseys said the FBI was not acceptable because it was not independent. But they did take 2 polygraph tests and it was inconclusive, and I have to wonder why the first one was inconclusive. And it could be that the first one was inconclusive because we are a little bit shaky. We're shaky and we have to get ourselves together. But on the second time around, we commit. I commit to the story, and I don't think in my mind anything else, because this is the thing. Without a shadow of a doubt, I know that I did not do this to my daughter. I know I didn't. But what I want to know, and I'll do that on next video, if Burke took one, and we'll talk a little bit more about that one. But that's the video for now. I'll come back and look at the rest of this, but that's the video for now. So stick with me to the next video. But until next time, take it easy.